Two.
Hello, Brian.
Hello, Briat. Good afternoon for me too. Not just you off in India. Let's just jump straight into it. We are on our third video for the Bhagavad Gita. Today we are covering the second set of 6 chapters in a little bit of an overview. So I'll just hand it straight over to you to get at it.
Okay, thank you very much once again for this opportunity and this platform to speak about the subject matter which is very dear to me. So today we're going to be looking at the overview of the middle 6 chapters, chapters 7 to 12 of the Bhagavad Gita. And these 6 chapters, they are talking a lot about bhakti. As we said, the first 6 are more about karma and karma yoga, and then bhakti yoga is the middle 6, and then the final 6 chapters, they deal a lot with gyan and gyan yoga. It's not necessarily exactly these different sections, they're not mutually exclusive, so it's not that you're not going to find some of the elements in the other places, but the focus is a lot different, as we'll see when we go through this overview. It'll be clear. So on chapter 7,
what is, just to start us off, what is bhakti yoga?
Okay, bhakti yoga is the path of love and devotion, of attaining yoga through expressing one's love and devotion for God in one's daily activities. And so one does have there's a spiritual practice also which aims to cultivate that natural dormant love that lies within your heart. But then it's also a matter of just making a internal adjustment to the ends of what you're trying to do with what you are doing. So instead of doing something for making money so you can buy a car or whatever, or try and be happy ultimately, so you can always boil it down to that, you are doing, the purpose of what you're doing is actually just to please God in one way or another. So then bhakti yoga is also then the science of God consciousness, which means how to please God. It's not just something like, if you want to know how to please somebody, then that means there has to be a relationship, has to be established. And because different people do different things. And if you desire to please somebody, that person might not tell you or reveal the inner parts of their heart to you. But if you have a relationship, if you're serving that person, which doesn't mean as a slave, but just serving them as a lover or as a friend or as a parent, or the different kind of exchanges that can happen, then naturally that person, they will open their heart to you. And you'll understand what it is that they like and what it is that they don't like and how to please them best. So this is the science of bhakti yoga.
There's a lot of confusion around pleasing God, and who, and historically there's been through a lot of different religions, is that there's an intermediary that decides how you need to please God. So so being able to really emphasize what that is, and that my understanding of it is that you just become more of who you truly are.
Yeah.
So it's really not, there's seeming sacrifices of giving up desires and the way we want things to be convenient. But the more that you actually delve into what it is that pleasing God is, the more aligned you get with yourself, and that God isn't asking you to be different than you are,
Exactly.
or different than you were created. So it's really about being able to understand your true nature, and there's a real alignment that comes with that. So let's just make sure we emphasize that, as long as we're more or less in agreement about that.
Yeah, we are in agreement. There's basically, if one analyzes the different types of transcendentalists, then they can be broken down into those 3 categories: karma yogis, or actually 4: karma yogis, gyan yogis, bhaktas, and ashtanga yogis. And where and karma yoga is quite related to bhakti yoga, so you can kind of put them under the same category, where you can see karma yoga as more of an, I would say, preliminary stage of bhakti yoga. But then you have these 3 approaches then. And Bhakti Yoga, this is distinguished from the other two, because from Jnana Yoga and from Ashtanga Yoga, you are required to actually give up your nature. Even though it's a false nature, you're required to give it up. You're required to stop all your sensory and external activity. Whereas with the Gyan path, you do that by studying the Vedic literatures, by performing activities which strengthen your intelligence. So that's why you're vegetarian, you're celibate, you're living in the forest, and all these things enhance your mental fortitude and your intellectual sharpness, so that you can apply it in distinguishing yourself from everything you're not. So it's quite an austere path. And with the Stanga yogis, they do the same, but they do it internally. Whereas the Jnana yogis, they're looking external world. And then the mystics or the Ashtanga yogis, they also, by the process of controlling the breath, they control the mind and the senses, they withdraw it from the external world. So, and then they cut out the external world completely, and then they go into the internal environment. And from there, they try to distinguish themselves from that also. Whereas with the, they also have to
just to be clear,
yeah?
Just to be clear, is that Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Ashtanga Yoga, I understand those three. What is the I'm not quite hearing what you're introducing as the second one.
Yeah.
Say that again and spell it.
Yoga. Gyan Yoga. It's usually spelled with the J-N, but it's pronounced Gyan, which means intelligence or knowledge, right?
Okay. And that's studying. That's studying. It's virtually studying the scriptures.
Exactly. It's studying the scriptures, but also critically thinking about them and applying it on the world around you and looking at it from that perspective, and then trying to make sense of it using your intelligence and trying to understand, I'm not this body. How am I not this body? And you're trying to realize that by application of your intelligence. Whereas the yogis, they try to realize themselves by application of their willpower, by strengthening their willpower. But
who does that?
The Ashtanga yogis. And the stronger your willpower becomes, that's also where you start developing mystic powers, where you can levitate, or whether you can hold your breath up for like an incredible amount of time. Even some yogis.
Or start a fire with your mind, etc.
Yeah. And then even like greater mystic powers, you can shrink yourself to be kind of small like an atom, or you can expand your body to be massive like a mountain. You can travel through the rays of the sun, or you can enter into a body of water, and then you can come up at any other place in that same body of water. And then in that way, since the Ganges particularly comes from beyond the material sky. So then, and it travels throughout the entire universe. You can enter into the Ganges then, and you can exit at any other place in the universe where the Ganges also flows. So that's kind of yogis use these passages.
Somewhere along the line, there's, I don't know where it's written, but something along the lines of that even when you discover these mystical powers is refraining from using them.
Yes.
Can you just a little put a little bit of emphasis on that?
Okay.
What the point about it?
For somebody who wants to become free from material bondage, they see those things as distractions, because they can actually distract you from your path, because you're trying to ascend. And then these things, they're very attractive and they're very cool to play with. And they're very difficult to resist, because, I mean, that amount of power available to you right now, how can you resist?
So it's talking about an ego interest in what capabilities or power that you can actually develop.
Exactly. And some people, they do yoga for those powers also. So then that's kind of motivated people. So that's also there.
Yeah, the next thing they need to deal with.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
let's get on with chapter 7-2.
But with Bhakti Yoga, you're not required to stop any of those things. In fact, it's the only school of yoga where you don't have to be celibate. The other schools of yoga, celibacy is a requirement. With Bhakti Yoga, you can engage sexual activity to a spiritual end, like that. And there's a particular process that one can follow of begetting spiritually conscious human beings that are
That's
able
me.
to actually transform this world. So anyway, so now in the seventh chapter, which starts this section of 6 chapters, Krishna starts by talking about, he's giving some knowledge of the absolute, and he's saying, in the beginning, he says that out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. So basically, Krishna, who is the absolute truth, who has come in a form that people can perceive, he's now describing himself. And in this chapter and the chapters following this, he's giving a lot of information of how one can see God in everything in creation. And I'll just give some examples. They're really nice. Um, but before that, he also shows how everything rests upon God. Everything rests upon the Supreme Spirit. And he gives the example as pearls are strung on a thread, that one is not able to see the thread. The pearls seem to be dangling in space by themselves. And that's what you see. And they're very beautiful and attractive. But one never actually appreciates the string which keeps them all together. The focus usually goes into the pearls themselves. And in that way, Krishna is explaining, that's how I am. Like I'm like the string, and all of existence are like the pearls. And everybody's looking at the pearls, but nobody's actually noticing the string keeping all the pearls together.
What connects them together? Yeah. What's the structure behind everything? Yeah.
And then he explains different types of people that do not approach God, and different types of people that do approach God. So they're 4 different categories. And then he starts giving some examples. Just going to find the space here. And he says that to actually understand the absolute truth is a very difficult endeavor, and very, very few people actually obtain it. And it takes hundreds and thousands of births to be able to understand that fully. And even after so much time, one can still only come to understand a very small part of the absolute truth, which in a sense is actually unknowable. So again, it's just showing you the vastness and unlimitedness of the absolute truth of God, and that we are very small, and it's not possible for us to actually comprehend everything, even if we have millions of births of lifetimes worth of time to our disposal. Still, we're barely able to scratch the surface. Okay?
Yeah, Samkhya Yoga suggests that it is unknowable to know the absolute truth.
So, but then he says that still there are ways in which you can perceive him in a meditation. And he says, for example, I am the taste of water, I am the light of the sun and the moon, I am the syllable Om in the Vedic literatures, I am the sound in ether and the ability in man. Which is interesting, like this thing of ability in man, for example. Whenever you're able to accomplish something, one can appreciate that you are able to accomplish it because you have been granted the ability to do it by God. And that ability itself is actually God essence. That's also something from him that's been imparted to you. Without that, you cannot do anything. You can't even lift your hand. So in that way, we can actually appreciate the Supreme Spirit's presence in our lives in these various aspects. I am the original fragrance of the earth. I am the heat and fire. I am the life of all that lives, and I'm the penances of all aesthetics. I am the original seed of all existence. I am the intelligence of the intelligent, and I am the prowess of all powerful men. I am the strength of the strong, devoid of passion and desire. I am sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles. So it's interesting how he's saying how you can realize God in all of these different things. And he's just listing a few. This is not like a what do you call it?
Exhaustive list.
Thank you. Not an exhaustive list, exactly. And then towards the end of the chapter,
I just wanted to say a word about that. Is that like when we discuss oneness, and that either there's two thought processes, that we don't know where everything came from, and there was a big bang or something.
Yeah.
And it's all random and disconnected, and there's a design of forces like gravity and such. Or the other school of thought, or at least the other school of thought is, I'm sure there might be a few more, is that everything is connected. The entire canvas is connected together with the same energy. That there is oneness means that absolutely everything has been created from one energy, and that all those things that you just described are just examples of what that oneness looks like, and all the structures and all the interconnectedness of it. The more we learn about the earth, the more we really get to see how interconnected it actually is. So I think that's it's a beautiful thought process, really to be able to understand that and feel it.
It is very nice.
And most importantly, feeling your connection to all that is.
Yes.
As soon as you actually allow yourself that experience, it really is spectacular.
Yes.
And undeniable.
It's a very individual thing, because you have although there's unlimited amount of souls and each one of them are connected to the same God, that your relationship with him is completely unique. There's no other soul that has the same relationship as you. So therefore, your experience of Krishna is going to be unique as well. So, but a lot of times that people are put off sometimes by spiritual processes is that people are told to do the same things. Like there's a specific process. You have to bow down like this or pray like this or whatever. And then they think, oh no, but spirituality is unique. But that's true. But in order to access that unique relationship, these processes are given to you to access that. It's not to limit you, it's actually to free you. And because these are scientific processes, these processes have not been created by mental speculation. Actually, if a person comes and presents you a process, your first question should be, where did this process originate from? And you should be able to trace it back to some authentic spiritual source. Not that all of a sudden, I'm just like the first guru in this line, or I'm the third one, and that first guy over there, he doesn't have any connection to anything. He's just kind of, from his heart, he could speak. This is not how spirituality works. There always has to be a link. And this is also in the previous chapters.
I just want to underline the thought that you were saying is that everybody's experience of creation is unique. You are a unique snowflake. Yeah. And I think that's worth underlining. So I'm really happy that you emphasized that.
Yeah. So to continue, in the 8th chapter, at the end of the 7th chapter now, Krishna also pretty much says that he reserves the right to not reveal himself to everybody. He reserves the right to not to be known by people who are miscreants, he calls it. People who are miserly, people who are miscreants, which is basically people who do not want to let go of their own preconceived ideas of what reality is and of what God is and who they are. They're not, which is another way of saying they're not ready to embrace who they are in its fullness without any of their preconceived ideas. And to those people, they bewildered and they speculate about the nature of God, and he gives some explanations of how a particular type of people think. Like Krishna says, some people think that actually I was impersonal first, and I've only now assumed this form which is talking to you, Arjuna, now, and that but these are people whose intelligence are bewildered. Or other people, they just think that my manifestation as Krishna is a material form, it's a temporary form, it's a form that's made up of material nature and energy like my body and your body. And he says that these people, it's just because they're not ready to actually engage into this relationship wholeheartedly. They've got some other motivation. They've got some work in their heart still that they need to sort out and go through. They're not yet actually ready to do that. Yeah. So now,
which I actually see as those preconceived ideas of perception are blind spots where they're not going to be able to see. So I think they are the creators of their own inabilities.
Okay. Yes, that's a nice way of saying it. Thank you. Okay. And in chapter 8, actually I'm spending too much time. I'm trying to reduce it a bit. It's very difficult.
Yes.
So in chapter 8, Krishna is talking about how to attain the Supreme. And he's also giving these different ways that people take to attaining the Supreme. And then he also says how that these different paths become complete. in the beginning, he just says, he tells Arjuna that, I'll just find the verse. First, he says, whoever at the end of this life, whatever he remembers, when he dies, that place that he will go to. So if you're thinking about God when you die, then you go to that place and you don't come back. But if you're thinking about something else, then that's where your consciousness is going to gravitate towards. So and what you're thinking about at the end of your life will be determined by what you spent your life doing. If you spent your life running after women or men, then that's what you're going to think of when you're dying. You're not going to be thinking of God. You can't expect if you just do half an hour little prayers or something the day, and for the rest of the day you're just kind of pursuing whatever your mind dictates to you, then at the end of life you're going to think of God. You can't expect that because he's not going to be so high up on your list of priorities, So
yes.
So okay,
it kind of points to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, talking about preparing for death, that it's important to be able to prepare for death and being able to know if you want what you're connected to and what consciousness you leave with matters.
Right.
So same idea.
Yes. So human life on this planet particularly is all about learning how to die. So that you die in the right way, so you can actually go to a place where you can just be in bliss like all the time, and you don't have to come back to a realm where you have to experience birth and death repeatedly. So in that sense, I think that's the perfection of human life, is to learn how to die with detachment from the material world and absorption in the supreme spiritual reality. So in the 8th chapter, he describes the Ashtanga Yoga process.
Just a footnote is that my intention is to die and my next reincarnation will be in a world of service. That people are serving the whole. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's beautiful.
Yeah, well, that's where I'm going because I'm tired of this one.
They say in the Vaishnav literatures, which I've read a lot. I've read about individuals who, when they reach that pure state of consciousness where they're completely detached and they're simply acting on behalf of God, and they don't really have a desire of their own besides wanting to serve God, and His creation, then their thoughts are not even, I want to become liberated anymore. Even that desire for moksha, they get purified from that, because that's also actually a material desire, because it's something you want. You want moksha because you want to be freed from all these inconveniences here. But these people on that state, they even then think, well, I don't care where I go. I could even go to like the most hellish condition ever. As long as I get to render service, transcendental service, then I'm happy. Wow. So that's their prayer. My prayer is that I don't forget you, my Lord, and that whatever situation I'm put under, I will never forget you and your devotional service. Therefore, and other than that, I don't really care where I go. And this is really, really, really pure kind of prayer.
I think I'm going to look to find out what I do when I die. It's going to be interesting. Just a footnote about that is that, like, for our Western thinking, is in Carlos Castaneda, they talk about everybody knows and sees and understands that birth is a miracle, the entrance into life, but the exit of life is also a miracle. And that most Westerners don't see that.
Yeah, that exactly, because Western thought is more based on this life is all you've got. YOLO. You only live once. This is Western thought. So therefore, you got to squeeze out as much nectar as you can from the stone. The stone has some water in it, and I'm going to squeeze it out as much as I can. That's Western mentality. It's exactly. And death is something undesirable because it interrupts your ability to enjoy. So therefore, let's try and kill death. That's what Western science is actually trying to achieve. Okay. So now in the 9th chapter, it's called the chapter "The Most Confidential Knowledge," and Krishna starts off at the 2nd verse. He says, Rajavidyam, Rajaguyam, Pavitram Itam Uttamam, Pratyaksha Dharnam, Susukam Kartamavyam, which means that this knowledge which I'm about to tell you, it's the king of all knowledge, and it's the most secret of all secrets. And it's a perfection of religion because it gives direct perception of the self by realization. And it is joyfully performed and it is everlasting. So here this word he uses is pratyaksha, which means you actually experience yourself. You get to have your own experience which validates this knowledge also. And the knowledge it gives can also be applied to validate that knowledge. Like it's basically you have a jar of honey, and the only way to understand what it tastes like is to stick your finger inside and to taste it. But by no amount of mental speculation will you be able to understand what that honey tastes like. You lick the outside of the jar and it won't give you anything. So the same way with spirituality and this knowledge Krishna is giving, one has to follow it, and then you can see for yourself the nature of that knowledge, and which I like a lot. Yes, I like that a lot. So he's explaining this in the 9th chapter, and he's explaining how the forces of God, like before he was talking about these different areas where you can experience him in fire and water, but he is also explaining how he's also controlling everything, that his very consciousness of God is present in every single thing that happens, and that there's actually no chance that happens, and that whatever everybody does is actually having an exchange with God. That like we're talking to each other, but actually I'm having an interaction with God in some way or other. But my consciousness might not be aware of that. So you are a soul in your body, and you're talking to me, and you also have an experiencing with God, who's also in my body. But in Bhagavad Gita, there's also a distinguish is made between the soul and God, which both of them are present in the body. And the difference is that God knows what's in your body and my body. I only know what's in my body, and you only know what's in your body. But the idea is that all our interactions, we're actually always facing God. You cannot turn your back from God. It's not possible, because He is everywhere and everything. And the Maya is thinking that you can turn your back against Him and that you're actually looking away from Him. That's actually Maya, illusion.
The Course in Miracles line that talks about that is, God is always shining on you. It's up to you to let Him to shine through you.
Oh, wow. That's really nice. And and that's exactly what the purified souls do also. They call it a transparent via medium, where they're just like a lens, and the light shines through that, and the lens just focuses it. But in a conditioned state, that lens is dusty, and that light can't shine through. It can't shine through properly, so others can't perceive it. But if you're a purified soul, other people can really feel that God presence coming through you, because you're not trying to take anything for yourself. You just, everything that comes towards you, you just understand people are giving it to God, so I'm not going to take nothing for myself. And everything that comes through you, you understand is actually the abilities. It's just God, and He's connecting to the people, including myself. So it's a very beautiful.
Well, I'm going to see where you are with your own ego experience right now. Because once again, I'm going to compliment you, and the point of it isn't a compliment, it's just my truth, is that you, my experiences of you as really being able to see your kindness. And, I've always just seen kindness in how you act. And, the time when you go camping with people, you can learn a lot about them. So, and that you were seamless in how you never took anything for yourself. It was just a really delightful experience to be around you. So there, put that in your funk and wagnall.
Thanks, I appreciate that. That's good encouragement for me. I'll try to live up to that.
Good.
Okay, so there's so the rest of the 9th chapter, Krishna he's explaining how, like he says, people, they're worshipping different celestial beings, they call them demigods, for some kind of purpose, which is usually a purpose for receiving something they can enjoy. But Krishna says, actually, these are just my different representatives, and they're actually worshipping me, but they're not doing it in the proper way. But they're worshipping me, but they don't know they're worshipping me. Krishna is speaking.
Are you talking? You're not talking about the demigods. You're talking about the people that are worshiping the demigods
Yes,
for
yes,
something that they want.
yes. And then
Yeah.
Krishna
Okay.
is saying in that process, people are actually worshiping God, but they don't know they are, and they're just doing it in the improper way because they're not
Yes.
meditating on God; they're meditating on their own result. So Krishna here is establishing that in these different ways, people are actually always looking towards God. And then he's saying, so therefore, whatever you're doing, you can also just dedicate towards Him then by just remembering, okay, this is actually just a part of God. And if I just connect it to Him, then I'm actually having an exchange in a relationship with Him. And then he gives this verse, which I like a lot. He says, Patram pushpam palam tuyam yome bhakya priyachiti tadaham bhakti paritam ashnami prayatatna. That if when you simply offer me with love and devotion a leaf, some water, a fruit, or a flower, then I will accept it. So it's just such a simple gesture as like you have a flower and you just like offer it to God. You're just thinking of Him. You're not just thinking of, oh, such a nice flower. You're first thinking of, you want to offer it, you want your beloved to enjoy it first. And then that's such a big shift in consciousness, just that. Where when you see something, your first thought is not mine. Your first thought is, it's God's. And then after it's been offered to Him, then you can utilize it for whatever you need it for. And then it changes the whole nature, it changes of that substance. For example, in my practice, I don't eat anything before I've not offered it, like in the ceremony. And it's a very simple ceremony. I've got a picture of Krishna. Whatever spiritual path you're in, you can put a picture of Jesus there. You can put a picture of Allah there, or whatever is more, what's the word, opposite of foreign, familiar to you, right? Or if you like, you just put a picture of Krishna there, and then
Yep.
you just, when you cook, you're thinking about pleasing God, and then you're not tasting the food either. It's the process that I follow, and then put it in front of the picture, and I say a little prayer. I say, I made this for you. Please, would you accept it? And then the whole quality of that food is completely different. You can. I have done tests on this before, where two recipes, exactly the same recipes, were made, and the one they followed this particular process, and in the other recipe they followed, which people would usually do. You're smelling it, you're tasting it a little bit, and then at the end the result was different, even though the same recipe was followed with the same ingredients, and but it was a different result, which proves that just this devotional consciousness goes into the food, and that God actually interacts with that devotion. It's not the food that God wants. It's not your money that He wants or the incense that He wants. It's your devotion. It's your love that He wants, which you can express to Him through these material things. And then He can interface, or He not interface, He receives it through that material thing. And that transforms that material thing into a spiritual thing, which is why there's a difference in the food at the end of the day, or the incense when you smell it, or even your body, if you're using your body spiritually, and or your clothes and your money, and it all changes. So it's a really amazing thing that really becomes an integrated thing of your every single day life, and it's not just a ritual that you perform, but it's actually part of your life. It's part of the way you think. It's a whole different paradigm, which is really nice, because that means you don't have to change who you are. You can just be that person, but be that person for God. And then you work on yourself too. It is also something you do. You do that for your friends and your spouse or your partner. You want to be the best you can be, so you're working on yourself. So the same thing, you can do that for God also. Yeah. So,
Just remembering that everything, in our disconnected from creation kind of way, and I'm speaking about myself, I'm constantly reminding myself to remember my connection to oneness, and that everything is sacred. Every moment, every action can be sacred. There's a way to operate in life from a place of sacredness. And just realizing your connectedness to all that is, let alone that changes everything, let alone from a place of service. And that you're doing everything that you do for God is yet another level of, and it shifts everything. It absolutely changes everything, as opposed to just little old me, against the world, and the only one working for me is me, and that you're disconnected from all that is, separate, living in separation, as opposed to living in connectedness. It changes everything. Just realizing that that's true, let alone service, that now I'm doing it out of service to creation. So beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder. It makes me feel good to feel these things.
Yeah.
I forget a lot, like most of the time.
Yeah, we all do, and that's why we're practicing to remember. So now in the 10th chapter, Krishna's talking about the opulence of the absolute, and Arjuna is also at one point thinking, asking him, how can I think of you all the time? He says, in what various forms are you to be remembered, O Supreme Personality of Godhead? And but just before that, there's one verse which he says, which I like a lot. He says, Tesham satata yuktanam vachitam pritipurvakam dadami bhuti yogam tam yena mahupyanti te. That to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, and who endeavor like that, I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me, which means that there is no handicap for you that can prevent you from attaining yoga. It means that if you have a very sincere desire and you're trying your very, very best to serve God with love, because we all have our problems that we have, we all have our vices, we all have our shortcomings and our negative patterns or whatever. And sometimes those things can be very, very difficult to snap out of, and which actually are, which makes us do things which are contrary to spiritual principles. Like Krishna says that if you're just trying your best and you're very sincere and you're thinking about pleasing me, I will give you the intelligence that you need so that you can actually come to me. And I like this a lot because this really adds to my human experience a lot, is that God is not this this bureaucrat, sitting on the top of the cloud somewhere, and if you do 1, 2, 3, then you will get him, and if you don't do that, then you don't get him. It's kind of like, you're trying to speak to somebody in the government offices, and they're just reading from a paper, and they say, sorry, you can't do this. You have to, let's say you have to file this paper, and you try to tell them, but I can't file this paper because your system won't allow me to even obtain the paper because this, and this. And I have to get this thing. And then they say, sorry, you have to file this paper. That's a bureaucracy. Yeah. You're not talking to a person. You're just talking to a policy. Yeah. But God is not like that. He is a personality just like us. So he has heart. Yeah. Right? You saying?
The distinctions I would put to that is that it's not prescriptive.
Yes.
It's intention based. What is your intent?
Yes. And that's also what we see. A lot of the modern day religions, they've disconnected from that aspect a lot, is that and added into this fear kind of based faith. They've added into to get more followers. You make people afraid of hell or a negative afterlife, and then but if you surrender to God, then you'll be saved from that. So you should come to God, and then it works for many people. But also for a lot of people, it's not working because they're not convinced by this fear-mongering. In their mind, it doesn't make sense that such a God exists, because how can God be like this? Because he's not. He's not like this. He's not like this dictator, this, I'll give you a reward if you do what I say. That's not love. Love is like, I'm going to do it for you because I want to do it for you, because I love you. Not because I want anything from you. And God is also like that. He's like, I don't want you to do it to me because you want something from me.
It's also that you get to do it in your way.
Yes. Do it in your way. And exactly. But also interesting thing about that is, which is now which one can get into the sentimentalist kind of path, is where you're focusing exclusively on your way in which you're trying to please God. But if I'm interacting with you and I want to please you, if I don't think about the way that you desire to be pleased, I'm just thinking about how I want to please you, then I'm never really going to have a very deep relationship with you. Because what about you? Now it's still all about me. So that's another side where you can go down, right? So then, which is why then they have like a process that people follow in spiritual traditions, which is like like a recipe that they do, and that everybody kind of, they do the same thing. And the scripture says, do this, do this, do this. And because it actually reawakens the true spontaneous nature of love to God, that then you can access that. So, and that also on the other hand has also been misused, because now they're trying to push people into boxes, and it's all about the box now. But actually these rules regulations are so that you can actually become transcendental to the rules regulations, but one has to follow them. So that's the other side, where people don't like to follow rules regulations, and then you get sentimentalists. So there's a nice quote that I've heard from this teacher. His name is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He was quite prominent in India in the early 1900s, and he said that religion without philosophy, no, sorry, the other way. He said, philosophy without religion is dry mental speculation, and religion without philosophy is sentimentalism and sometimes fanaticism. So you need both. You need both. You need mind. You need, it's the masculine. You need that grounding factor so that you can, so that there is a boundary in which you can work, because we need boundaries. Everybody needs boundaries. Otherwise, you know, there's no direction. But at the same time, you need heart as well. That feminine, you know, if you want to kind of talk in those kind of terms, that it has to be balanced. There has to be heart. There has to be my experience, my individuality, my expression, my desires. So these two, they can come together properly when in spirituality, you know, there's a healthy big mix between religion and philosophy. And part of philosophy includes science, you know, so there's Sankhya and these things also. So basically in chapter 10 and what is it? I think chapter 11 as well. Let's see. No, in chapter 10, Krishna explains more ways in which he can be perceived, and ways he is manifest, like in the material world. And then in chapter 11, he displays his universal form, which is a mystical form, which Arjuna was able to perceive. And actually, everybody on the battlefield was able to see it. You know, it was spoken just before this big war was taking place. And this is one of the proofs that Krishna presented, that he is in fact the absolute truth, and that he's not just some person claiming to be that. Because there are a lot of people that do claim that I am God. So then some person can ask you, you know, okay, if you're God, then, you know, can you kind of show something, like, you know? And then you can ask them to show the universal form. Like my spiritual teacher, he once said in a bit of a humorous way, he was just illustrating this point of how people very easily like to profess that they are God. And he said that one day he was in New York and he met God. And God was well disguised. He was sitting on a bench, and it was this old man, and he had a few teeth missing. And this person told him that I am God. And then I'm just like paraphrasing it. And he said, wow, this is so wonderful to finally meet you. You know, I've been chanting my whole life. I've been praying a lot and all these things I've been doing. And finally I get to see you. But, you know, I have a little bit of doubt in my mind. So could you please do something, you know, just to dispel this doubt? And the person says, yeah, what do you want? This is an actual interaction, what happened, by the way. And then he said, well, you know, perhaps you could make those trees over there grow a bit taller, because it's a little bit hot and the sun is kind of shining on us. And then this man said, what makes you think God can do that? And then he said, well, isn't God all powerful? And then the man said, well, that's your conception of God. And then he replied, and what's your conception of God? That God is a toothless old man that doesn't have any power? That means anybody can become God. And what kind of a God is that? So I thought he was raising a really good point, that people sometimes they claim, you know, this, that they are God, but it's not impressive, because they're not actually, what kind of a God is an impotent God, you know? So anyway, here, what's that?
Oh, you were, no, it was hard for me to hear you. So keep going.
Okay. So anyway, so here Krishna shows the universal form, and he shows the different aspects of him, which Arjuna experiences as absolutely mortifying, because of the images and things that he's seeing. He's seeing eternal time, which is acting and is basically killing everybody one by one like that. And that time is the thing that's driving all of material kind of creation. And anyway, he becomes very afraid because it's a very overwhelming sight for him to see. And we can get a little bit into that more when we come back to the next level of this chapter. And finally, in chapter 12, Krishna is describing directly a devotional service. And he's saying that just devote your energy to me, give up the results of your activities, think of me, work for me, and that, like he says here, just fix your mind. Oh, sorry, before I go into that, what I like about this section is he's saying, do this. And if that is too difficult for you to do, then do this. But if you cannot do that for some reason, then do this. So he's actually giving everybody a chance to engage at the level that they are at. So he says here, where is this? Just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always without a doubt. If you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. In this way, develop a desire to attain me. That means if you want to think of God all the time, you will. And if you can't think of him all the time, then just spend your energy into developing that desire so that you want it. And then he says that if you cannot practice the regulations of Bhakti Yoga, then just try to work for me, because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. If you are unable to work in this consciousness of me, then try to act giving up all results of your work and try to be self-situated. If you cannot take to this practice, then engage yourself in cultivation of knowledge. Better than knowledge, however, is meditation, and better than meditation is renunciation of the fruits of action. For by such renunciation, one can attain peace of mind. So I like that a lot, because sometimes one might find something that's too difficult to do. And then, but here Krishna is saying, but that's okay, because there are other alternatives that you can do. Don't worry, because if you do it in these ways, you will still be able to purify yourself, and you'll still be able to come to the perfectional stage which you want to get to. So, which again is like God acknowledging our human existence right now. Like he's acknowledging where we're at. He knows, he understands, he's got empathy. And he says, don't worry, you can still do it under your current condition that you are in.
Yeah.
So this
it just means to me that it's a system that can actually work. Because if it doesn't have modifications for where people are, then it's not going to work at certain levels for certain people. So
exactly, and so it has to be all inclusive. This is one thing which I really appreciated from the Bhagavad Gita, is that I knew that spirituality has to be all inclusive. Nobody must be left out, because if somebody's left out, how that can be spiritual? Because everybody is a spiritual being. Even if you're the most envious, kind of degraded, like demonic person ever, they still have to be included in your paradigm somehow or other. So I like that about the Bhagavad Gita. It's all inclusiveness, where it embraces everybody, even people who don't believe in God, even people who are envious of people who believe in God. Even they, one can show love to in a particular way and appreciate, as one can appreciate God's splendor in them also in many, many different ways. So in this chapter, it's kind of showing the universality of devotional service and its universal application, and that it's something that's accessible for everybody. At any moment, anybody can apply it. It's simply a matter of wanting to do it. Yeah. So I'll end. I'll end with that. With these, that's the last, the middle 6 chapters, and this is chapter 12 that we finished now. Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to make one point and then ask a few questions. What's our time?
We're at 49 minutes.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
How does that happen? Okay, so I'll be quick. just one point about the 1, 2, 3s, like that you were emphasizing how much the system, the discipline of coming to God isn't a prescriptive 1, 2, 3 of this is what you need to do. And can you imagine, it's like any healthy relationship. Can you imagine if somebody told you how to have a relationship with your partner or your mate or your wife, and it was a 1, 2, or 3 prescriptive thing?
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
No.
And realizing that relationship is an exchange. So it's not just your devotion to creation. It's also the relationship, the exchange back and forth is what a relationship is.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the questions that I have for you is, can we talk about you for a second?
Okay.
When you left the temple and moved, a couple 100 kilometers away, and we're in regular everyday life, what was that like for you? Like, what was your experience of integration and really losing your community? I assume. So how was that for you? What did you learn, and how did that go for you?
On one level, first I'll say it was a very difficult period in the sense of reinventing myself, because I had to now find out who am I going to be now in terms of in this world, who am I going to be. So I kind of had to test a few things out and see what I liked and see what worked, but also see what is compatible with my spiritual path. So that was the most important thing for me, is that whatever I'm doing has to be compatible with that, that I'm not willing to compromise on those principles. And so when moving out, it was really difficult. But I think for some reason or other, maybe it was some kind of mercy I got, I was a little bit ignorant of the difficulty that I was actually facing until much later, when I was actually able to deal with it really well. But at the time, it was like I was pretty much running on mercy all the time, because it was like a big gamble. It was like a massive gamble, because I did not go into the system with a job and things like that. I basically, somehow I had a little bit of money. A friend had given me a scooter as a gift, and so a 150cc scooter, and I drove to it from Cape Town to Caledon to test it, and it worked. And my idea was, I was going to move to the garden route, like nice non-Plettenberg Bay, and what happened was that without asking it, then I don't know, I shouldn't not get too much details, but certain resources came to me without me really asking for it, which really helped me, and I couldn't have done without them. For example, a car just came somehow or other, and I just sold the scooter, and I was told that I just need to give 1/3 of the price of the station wagon car, which served me for the next 2 years until I actually left South Africa. And as well as from a friend I was about to start a little business with, and by some way, he was able to acquire some money. It was 30,000 Rand to start this business, and it was going to be cooking and selling food. But what happened was, somehow or other, he just abandoned the whole thing, and he left Europe, and I ended up with all this money. He gave it to me with the intention of paying it back, but with no conditions on as to when I should pay it back. And which was amazing, because I would not have made it without that. And that I was able to actually establish myself for the next 2 years, to maintain myself, and then to just also reinvent myself. And I was able to make ends meet with this by selling food at festivals and at markets, and I was able to pay my rent. And anyway, my experience of that was, I can't believe that this is actually working. How is it that all of these things have come? And even the people that I've met, were also key in me finding the places where I was staying and all kinds of things like that. So it was really much me. I was very foolish in many ways, but there was always this divine guidance. I felt like I was like this child, and he's just running around. He's not paying attention. And every now and then you just feel this push on the shoulder, and you don't realize that actually you just missed the very sharp and hard corner of this table that was going to hit you in the face. But you're just going on running, and the parent is there, and then just before you slip on this puddle and smack on your face, there's just like the parent just wipes the puddle dry. So it was very much like that for me. So in that way, I was able to experience God in my life quite intimately, how he was there helping me, supporting me. And at some point also, he making me more serious in my path as well. Because I became a little bit more relaxed, like in actually following the spiritual routine. Because the temple environment really, really nurtures that and encourages that. And now I was on my own, and I had to do that on my own strength, and also think about these other things. So there was a year or a bit more, which I was a bit relaxed in that. But then when I came back into it, I was like more serious than before, deeper realizations. I was actually able to appreciate, bhakti yoga with much less of my own precepts, and actually appreciating the spiritual nature of what it actually is, and which was quite amazing. And basically where I'm now, I can't believe I'm now where I am. And I think it's a really epic story, which maybe one day I'll write about it. But I think it's quite phenomenal. For me, it's really amazing how God loves me so much that he did all of that for me.
I knew that was going to be a good story about you leaving. There's a lot more. There's a lot more to that.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll when we get the regular podcast off the ground, I think that's going to be one of the stories that we delve into if you're so interested.
Yeah.
I have a few more questions for you, but in being able to keep this video as short as possible, I will ask those questions tomorrow, or maybe intersperse them through the videos.
Okay, sounds good to me. All right.
Are we finished? Are you happy with your chapter 12?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. It's a difficult task giving overviews of the Bhagavad Gita, but I hope that the listeners got some value from that, and that if it's inspired you in the least bit, I'll consider it successful. Yes.
Beautiful.
Right. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much once again,
Yes.
Vyats. Love and light, my friends.
Haribol. Till next time.
Hopefully see you soon.